Hi, I'm Kenny.
And this is Monica.
And you're listening to Questioning Faith,
A podcast where we discuss our journey with the Christian faith.
In this first episode, we talk about the what, who, and why of the show.
That's going to be what we want our podcast to be about, who we hope is listening, and why we are jumping into this.
I had a lot of fun recording this podcast, and learned a lot about the process of recording.
I did too. I was a podcasting virgin, which is probably rare amongst millennials these days. I really settled in after a couple minutes, and it felt fun and interesting.
Yeah.
So I hope we continue to produce content for you guys, and that you find our life experiences and our thoughts as interesting as we do.
We want to talk about how religious faith isn't based in fact.
Like we thought it was.
Right.
In that when you grow up in the church, you're given reasons to believe. As soon as you're old enough to start questioning, like, how do we know there's a God? How do we know there's a Jesus? The people in charge, either your parents or the teachers, they start giving you reasons to believe. And you can call those reasons evidence, or you can call it something else, but you're given reasons to believe. For example, we know that Jesus really existed. There's historical evidence. I was told that. We know the tomb was empty. Like, there's historical evidence.
We know that Noah's Ark was real. We know
right, we have
Moses came down off. Like, all of these things are presented, at least from where we came from, all of these things were presented as absolutely true, that the Bible is absolutely true.
Right.
And I think that seems to be the case in most faiths. Not necessarily that the Bible is true, obviously, but like that there's this scripture, or there's a story, there's some kind of mythology that is believed to be absolutely true and is presented as true.
Right.
We want to talk about where we came from, that we were both very religious people.
And why we were religious.
Right.
What foundation that was built on.
Yeah. And then there was a huge shift in our life, and we stopped believing. Not that we didn't believe the whole time, and we were just pretending, but we really believed this.
We were all in.
We were presented with evidence. We searched out evidence for ourselves, and we stopped believing.
It took a long time. It wasn't like we were believers one day and then non-believers the next. It took years to get to that point. And so when people ask us, like, what happened? You know, it's like you can't point to one thing. You can't say, oh, I read this book or I watched this debate and then it was over. Like, it's not how it happened. It was a slow transition that took a lot of time.
Yeah.
So this podcast, hopefully for me, will cover an explanation of that a little bit.
Yeah. How
we were believers, the reasons for believing, and then what we learned that changed my mind and led me to what I think now is a more honest view of reality from what it was.
I'm in the same boat there. I'm hoping that we can explain where we were, what changed, and where we are now for people to hear it. And then I don't want it to end there. Like, I don't want it just to be our story, but I also kind of want to like get into what religion is. Right.
What it's based on. And then the reality of the facts. What facts we were fed that were lies, the mythology that they were based off of that led to those lies, and then what the actual facts are. For example, Jesus was a historical figure. I mean, it's fairly well grounded in fact that there was somebody named Jesus who lived back then. But how much is fact to that? In that, do we know that he was divine? Like, was he, is he God? Did he do miracles? Or was there just hundreds of people named Jesus back then? Like, what does that mean when we say there was a historical figure named Jesus? And how much does that actually lend toward Christianity being real? So when I'm told when I'm 10, oh, do we know Jesus was real? He's this historical figure. Like, what does that mean? Why is that evidence? And then decide for yourself if it is, if it's one of your reasons for believing or if it's not. Like, but at least understand the reality of the situation when people say that. So we want to dive into the facts.
Specifically what the Christian religion is and what the facts are, the actual facts are around that. The facts that are presented within the faith, within the various faiths that are called Christianity, which is, I think, a whole other conversation that I think we should have at some point about how we had this blanket term Christianity that covers a wide range of faiths.
Right, you got Catholicism, Mormons even count themselves as Christians.
Yeah, and then you have,
some cases.
Baptists, Episcopals, Anglicans,
Mm-hmm.
and the list goes on. And on.
Yeah. I mean, there's thousands, probably more than are nameable.
Yeah.
So an explanation of the shift in views.
What else do we want to say?
And we want to say, well, we want to help others overcome like their own religious indoctrination, because I do feel like I was indoctrinated.
Yeah.
And so some people weren't. Some people join when they're older. But for most people, I don't know what the statistic is, at least upward of 90%, believe the religion of the time period, region, and location that they're born into. And so why is that? And then how can you check that? And make sure that you're not just falling into, well, if I was born in Pakistan, I would be this religion. If I was born in Rome 2,000 years ago, I'd be this religion. Like, how do we counter that and make sure that we're not just falling into the religion of our geography and time? So help others overcome their religious indoctrination, really no matter what they are, Christianity or not. But our focus is Christianity just because we're more familiar with it.
I really, really want this podcast to be about asking questions.
Yes. It's okay to ask questions.
Yeah. There were a number of times in my upbringing where, I mean, it wasn't always outright stated, don't ask questions. It wasn't necessarily that, but there was kind of, there was a realm of questions that were kind of seen as, that's not faith, or that leads out of faith. That's doubt.
To their credit, they were right.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's this stigma that's placed on doubt, right? I mean, the only person in the Bible that's referred to with doubt is doubting Thomas, right? And he's called that kind of in a mocking way. Actually, was it Richard Dawkins who said maybe doubting Thomas should be the patron saint of scientists?
Oh, yeah.
Because he's the doubter, he's the one who wants to ask questions. But
well, you say that, but even within the context of the Bible, nobody else believed either. He was just the only one that said it out loud. Like, because none of the other disciples believed the tomb was empty either until they saw it.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what doubt is, and I want to establish that doubt is a good thing.
Yeah.
That doubt is a way that we can engage with the world in a meaningful way, and not just follow whatever we're told.
Right.
That's another thing that I would like to talk about at some point, is there's a claim that faith is not based on evidence.
Well, they use the evidence of the Bible. They use the evidence of where they find the Bible, who wrote the Bible, the historical evidence that shows who wrote the Bible.
Yeah.
Every claim of belief, they support it with evidence from the text. It's absolutely an evidence-based system. It's only a faith-based system when they don't have answers. Then it's like, well, you have to revert back to...
Well, you just believe it.
You just believe it. You have to take it on faith. Like, that's the go-to response when there isn't sufficient evidence.
Yeah. So those are some of the things we want to talk about. And I think that this list could keep going.
Yeah.
And there's so much that I would like to talk about that we haven't even thought about. But that's kind of a preview of where we want this podcast to go.
I guess in summary, that was why we turned from religion, how we got to be involved in religion, how we were able to leave it, and then just details.
Yeah, dissecting what religion is and why we think certain parts of it are so wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, how about our audience?
Who we hope might listen to this.
Yeah. So
I'm kind of hoping that, in addition to, like, friends and family who have asked me, like, where did you come from? Why'd you go that way? A more thorough explanation of that, because it's so complicated and it takes a long time. I've never been able to sufficiently answer that for anybody. Mm-hmm. Other than those people, I would hope that people who are on the cusp of maybe leaving religion, or they're on the cusp of getting into religion and they just want to, like, delve into it deeper, that they are given a few good questions to ask or thought processes to follow that might either lead them in or out, whatever direction they want to go, but just gives them things to think about before they make their decision. Yeah, and I kind of want to talk to, like, atheists and agnostics, non-believers in general, who want to understand the thought process of a Christian. What goes into, like, why they can believe, how they can believe. Yeah, that makes sense. Because it's a little bit, like, in the same line of thought. I've had non-believers ask me, why did you believe that? Mm-hmm. And why did you change? And I haven't been able to give them a full answer in a single conversation. Yeah, it takes hours. I mean, it took us years, so it's going to take a long time. Yeah. So I kind of want to talk to non-believers who just kind of want to understand the believer mindset. Mm-hmm. And then even the flip side of that, I would like to reach the believers who want to know how someone could not believe. Because I remember as a believer being astonished by non-believers. Like, how could they not, And it didn't ever used to make sense to me how someone could disregard the Christian faith. And so I would like to explain it, even if it doesn't change their mind, like that's perfectly fine. But at least give them an explanation to why I changed and why I think they're wrong. So I guess really our audience could be anyone, but it's really the people within each category, believer, not believer, in between and unsure, the whole reach of where people are, but it's the people specifically who are asking questions about how could they not, how do they, what question should I ask? So it's for questioners.
Yeah, essentially that's what it comes down to.
No matter what you believe.
We want to talk to questioners, people who are willing to ask questions about religion. Okay.
So that's our target audience, everyone with questions, no matter their background.
All right. Well, the last thing that we should talk about before we finish is our whys. So we've kind of touched on our whys a little bit already in this conversation when we're talking about what the podcast is and who we're talking to. But I also think that we each have different reasons for why we want to do this podcast.
Yeah, our motivations.
Yeah. And so, would you like to start?
Okay, well, leaving the faith that I was in was a massive turn in my life, and it cost me a lot. It cost me greatly. More than anything in my life ever has. And I'm coming from a place where Jesus was my focus in my mind and heart. Like, I used to pray constantly to God. I used to constantly seek Him. And my goal was to proclaim Christ to the world in every encounter, all of the time. It was just a constant, like, it was at the forefront of my mind all of the time. And so losing that was catastrophic for myself for a long time, like in how I lived each day. It was just different. So the goal of proclaiming Christ to the world occupied my mind all of the time. And I spoke to God continuously for His guidance and wisdom. And fear of death never even really occurred to me. Like, I knew it would be sad and I knew it would be hard, but we would all be together again someday in heaven. Like, I knew that, and I was sealed with the Holy Spirit, so I knew where I was going. I'd be with God. When all of that changed, the complete deconstruction almost of self and the loss of my identity in Christ, it was brutal and excruciating, and I went away kicking and screaming. I did not want to leave the faith. I kept just clinging for reasons to continue to believe it. Like, I wanted those reasons so badly. Like, real reasons, though, not anything, like, it had to be substantial, or I didn't feel like I was allowed to comfort myself based on lies. So I had to constantly seek the truth, but I really did leave kicking and screaming. And now I feel this desire to explain myself, not just to others, but I want to explain myself to myself. And I feel like it'll be like cathartic and useful for my personal growth to do that, because I really did. My entire identity was wrapped up in Christ. And so losing that, I had to re-find myself. So this will be a good means to do that. And then also a lot of people ask, like, how and why I quote unquote fell from religion. And it's a complicated answer. And so this kind of gives me the time and the space to kind of delve through that for them if they want to listen, or just for myself taking that personal journey.
I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about this. The whole journey through leaving faith was us having conversations. But I'm not sure we've really sat down and dissected it in this kind of format of talking about it all in that kind of retrospective way.
Like a linear, like what happened first, what happened next, like we were kind of we were mixed up in it, and it was painful and horrible, but we kept talking about it every once in a while. We would avoid talking about it for months.
We would, yeah.
And then we would force ourselves to look at it and have another conversation, and we'd find that both of us were farther away from the faith than we were, but we didn't realize it was slipping for a long time. We thought it was just changing for us a little bit, or our questions changed a little bit. But yeah, we haven't done this retrospective look, so it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
But I think that's my why. What do you think is your why for wanting to do this podcast?
Like you, I mean, I was a hardcore believer. I was raised in the church. My earliest memories are in the church. In a church building and being part of a church family. And then late junior high school age, I started teaching Christianity. And so ever since then, 13, 14, 15, up till I was 30 years old, I was teaching people to follow Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I was teaching people about the Bible. I was teaching people the precepts of Christianity and why they should believe in it. Why they should believe the gospel. Why they should model their life after Jesus. And now now that I think that the Bible and Christianity and faith in general doesn't really line up with reality, I a little bit want to undo. I have this kind of desire to undo all of the quote unquote damage that I've done.
Oh my gosh. Yep.
But I mean, really, I don't know about really thinking about it as doing damage, because I do think that religion can bring about good things in the world, and it has that potential. But the more and more I look at it now from outside of the faith, those benefits I don't think are the result of the religion, but rather the result of progress and people trying to do better than what the religion does.
Yeah, the people are just good, and in spite of the religion almost.
Yeah, and so I'd like to tell anybody who would listen why I left it. Mm-hmm. I want to explain myself, like you said.
Yeah, the explanation of self.
If I can give people the opportunity to break away from that tie to religion, or keep people from going into it by talking about these things, then I think that it'll help me kind of move on with my life, and then it'll help me find a new purpose. Because that's the other thing about this, is my whole purpose in life until we left was the gospel.
Serve Jesus. Me too, right there with you.
And I had a direction for my life. Mm-hmm. I was a pastor.
We were serving God. That was our purpose.
And I had purpose to my life. Mm-hmm. And now that I don't believe it anymore, now that I see that it's not true, I need to find a new purpose.
Right.
And I think that maybe this podcast or something like this, of being able to share my experience and share my journey, can be at least part of that purpose.
Yeah, maybe like at least a smidgen of it.
Yeah.
Like being able to explain it all and reflect back to other people. It's really good. It is. It's amazing how the rug gets ripped out from underneath you when it comes to your identity and your purpose in life without religion. Mm-hmm. And it makes complete sense. And now this existential crisis of what's it all for, I never had to do that before. Never even really needed to think about it. But now it's just completely different. Like one could even argue that there is no purpose, and they're not even wrong, I mean, the sun explodes in billions of years and everything's gone. But the purpose, just because and this used to be one of my arguments for God, which is astonishing to me now, is, well, if there is no God, there is no purpose. So how can there be no God? Well, just because there's no purpose without God doesn't mean that the God exists, like amazingly comforting that as much as that would be.
Right. As far as there being like a purpose, like this big grand purpose of all of life or all of existence, the words that we have, the meanings that are there, we give them those
humanity
meanings.
Assigned it.
We ascribe meaning to everything.
Yeah. There's no intrinsic meaning to it.
Right. And we can see that through the way language changes over time.
Right.
And I think that we do that to everything. And so finding meaning in life, finding meaning in the universe, or meaning in existence, I think that we had that view of it has to be top down. But it seems more accurate to say that it's bottom up.
Right. And just because it doesn't last for an eternity doesn't mean that it doesn't have purpose, or just because it's not some part of some overarching theme for existence or eternity doesn't mean it doesn't have purpose, which I would have said before that it was necessary to have purpose, that it be eternal. For some reason, that was built into what purpose was. But now you're right. Instead of, well, it lasts forever, it's part of a plan, so it has meaning, working top down. Now we're like, okay, well, here's what we have. Here's the reality. How can we find purpose in that? Like helping others, being kind.
And hopefully we'll get into this later, but a little bit, I think that top-down mentality, that meaning has to come from the top, has to come from this supreme being or whatever, is what leads to all kinds of terrible things happening.
Yeah.
Because I'm not doing this because I'm a bad person. I'm doing this because I'm supposed to. That's the meaning of life. That's the purpose.
Yeah. The purpose of life is to serve this creator. This creator says this, so I need to do this. It can be disastrous. It can be, it doesn't have to be disastrous.
No.
But it very well was disastrous for a lot of extremists.
I would like to try and ask a question at the end of our episodes.
Something for people to ponder.
Yeah. And maybe the question for this first episode, where we have talked about why we want to do this, maybe you could ask, why do you want to listen to this podcast?
That would be a good one.
What do you want to get out of this podcast?
Mm-hmm. Another question, I think, is what do you believe and why? Or why do you believe what you believe?
That's a good one. And I think that one is one that I think that we can carry over into our next two episodes. So why do you want to listen to this show?
And why do you believe what you believe?
Thanks for listening to our first episode of Questioning Faith.
We hope you guys enjoy listening to it as much as we enjoyed making it.
If you have any thoughts or questions you want to share with us, you can reach us at kennyandmonicaskquestions@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Facebook.
Our next episode, which is my testimony, will drop on August 30th. But in the meantime, remember,
always ask questions.